especially if James Harden ends up in the Eastern Conference too, which looks like
Right.
it could happen sooner rather than later.
Oh, I'm glad you brought him up because I'm sure you both saw this tweet from John Granado, who
really? Are we doing this?
We're going to do it from ESPN 97.5 in Houston. The man, if you read him on Twitter, he loves his wife, kids, golf, Coors Light, and poker, and no one is sure in what order, says, quote, an impeccable source, not just a source, an impeccable source, says the Raptors and the Celtics are the favorites right now for James Harden. It'd be a package for Pascal Siakam and more, or Jalen Brown and more. Clearly the and more, because mathematically it just has to work that way. Let's, for a moment, entertain what I think is lunacy. I don't think the Celtics are in the mix for James Harden, but please, I invite both of you to tell me if I'm wrong about that. I'm not saying Danny Ainge hasn't or wouldn't inquire. I think that's, it's part of his makeup. It's also part of his job to do his due diligence. I just don't think it's a reality. I really do not. There's no part of me now. Granted, if you asked me this a couple of years ago, would I have thought Kyrie Irving was coming to Boston in August? The answer would have been no. So I will fully admit that, but I do not believe James Harden is coming to Boston. I don't think I think there was a better chance of the Patriots eking out a playoff spot this year when they had 2% odds than James Harden coming to Boston. And also just to, I don't know, further respond to the tweet, I suppose. And I know plenty of people would disagree with me on this. This is just my belief. I don't think Danny Ainge would trade Jalen Brown for James Harden. I really don't.
It depends what kind of James Harden you're like. If James Harden wants to come here, then yes, they do that trade.
Year?
What's that?
Even for 1 year, like James.
Well,
Harden?
You got 2 years on his deal still.
Okay.
So you got 2 years and then a huge player option, which he may or may not give yet. So I mean, it's not like a slam dunk. Like obviously Jalen's got 4 years left at a good price. His age matches up much better with Tatum than Harden does, obviously. But Jalen Brown's a very good player. James Harden is a perennial
he's a
top
far
5
superior player. I just think if it depends on what you're building toward. Are you really trying to win right now or next year? Then sure, you start to think about a James Harden more realistically in terms of Jalen Brown. But if you're really trying to plan this next window out with Tatum and Brown as being your guys, it doesn't make sense.
Right. And so that's where, again, what's Harden's head, where's his head at? And that's like
strip club.
That's the track record says it's not in a good spot. And that's why the Celtics aren't going to, offer what needs to be offered for them to get a deal done here. But yeah, like I do think that all reports are that, the Celtics have done their due diligence and are not interested for that reason. And again, Kyrie Irving serving as kind of the warning tale, if you will, of trading for the star who has 2 years left on their deal, but has questions about, their character and things like that, or just like how, all the baggage he brought with him, and that we all saw how that turned out. So giving up Jalen Brown for that, and I think honestly, it'd be a situation where it'd be Brown and Smart for a deal that the Rockets would actually take if you're going to make it. I don't think the Celtics will do that unless they think that Harden is, all in and happy to be here, which it sounds like would not be the case.
Yeah, that's the tough part. The one thing I'll say this, I think people forget already that just a few years ago that if they don't go super cold from 3 or if Chris Paul is getting hurt, they likely, go toe-to-toe with the Warriors, maybe win that Game 7, go on to the NBA Finals, and maybe win a championship. So you're talking about the Kevin Durant-led Warriors with Curry, Clay, and Dre. That's one of the best teams we've ever seen, and James went toe-to-toe with that team. So you're getting a way better player than Kyrie Irving. You're getting a head case, no question, but you're getting just a way better player. And Adam's point of, it kind of points to what window you're doing. Right? If you acquire James Harden, that means you're trying to win right now. And if you don't, you're more likely trying to play the long game. The thing with Harden is, with the exception of Brooklyn, the team that acquires James Harden acquires the best player on their team. And that I'll even throw that if Boston were to acquire James Harden, Harden would be their best player right from the jump. And I don't mean to disparage, people that love Tatum a lot. And Tatum's a great player, but Tatum's not quite there yet. I mean, he's a good defensive player, but the stuff that James Harden does on offense is unbelievable. Okay. If he went to Philly, he'd be the best player on Philly. If he went to Miami, he'd be the best player in Miami, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So whoever acquires him is probably acquiring their best player. And in a what is now an arms race in the Eastern Conference, Danny knows that you need star power to win. And again, I'm not advocating for trading for James Harden because I just don't think he fits what this team is. He's not a defensive first player. Boston tends to like those guys, the guys that can play defense, and kind of learn a little bit as they go. Marcus Smart, Jalen Brown, Romeo Langford, all, I think, examples of that, where Smart could play defensively from day one. He's a guy that stayed on the floor because he could play defense. Jalen Brown came in and out. His minutes early on were spotty. Romeo Langford, once everybody realized he could play defense, he saw a lot of time, and he started to kind of get comfortable out there. James Harden doesn't feel like that kind of player. That being said, he would be arguably the best player in the Eastern Conference. If he were to come East, he'd be the best player on your team. And if all you care about is winning a title, then you make that deal. And Danny knows that star players win in this league. He obviously has made trades for stars in the past, worked out with Kevin Garnett, didn't work out with Kyrie Irving. If you're batting 500, that's not so bad. I don't think they match up on a deal, but if they were to do it, I think people would get on the James Harden train pretty quick, because I think they would love the fact that he can score 30 a game very effortlessly.
It's kind of hard to believe that we've gone this far into the show without.
Oh, hold on, Kaufman. You gotta give me a take on something. You gotta have
I said that Danny Ainge wouldn't do it, and it's not the right guy.
No, but would you do it, Adam? This is my question.
No, I don't want James Harden. I think James Harden's a quitter. I think he's one of the greatest offensive players in the history of the NBA. I think he's incredibly lackadaisical, and the give a bleep meter is very low when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. I think that he had a lot of talent around him in Houston, not to say that they were up to the level of the, Golden States and some of the teams they had to compete with. Daryl Morey built those teams as best he could. He had a lot of talent around him, Russell Westbrook included, another prima donna, obviously, but, he couldn't never mind his game. His game was fine. He couldn't take the team to the next level. There are aspects of his game I can't stand, which are today's NBA in general. Like I just have no desire as a fan, like as a viewer of basketball on a daily basis. I have no interest in watching a guy who takes a dozen 3-pointers a game. That's not for me. It's not good looking basketball. It's just not pleasing to the eye. But obviously he hits a good chunk of them, and he shoots a good percentage, and he's going to keep doing it, and he would keep doing it even if he didn't. I just don't. When I think about culture, when I think about influence, impact, grooming Tatum for, his next steps, and plenty of people were panicked by the idea of Tatum learning at the heels of Kyrie Irving. Well, I kind of feel the same way about James Harden. That's just not a guy to me that I want to come in and, as you said, Evan, instantly be my best player, and having everyone kind of kowtow to this guy. He got his way year after year after year in Houston, and never in the grand scheme of things really won anything. Like 50-win seasons are great, and you can have a whole bunch of them, but ultimately, what are you remembered for? And he's, fair or unfair, kind of Charles Barkley like, he's going to be remembered, at least as of now, for not winning.
Yeah, my point though is, like, if you go back a few years and you look at what he did against that Golden State series, I mean, he's clearly capable of getting there. Yeah. And him and Chris Paul got very close to it. Could him and Tatum get that team close to it? The flip side is, and B-Rob I think touched on this, Smart's probably going, if that's the deal. So can you get to a title with Harden and Tatum, but your roster and does Kemba fit on that team? Where does Kemba fit in the whole equation with Harden on the team? Because Kemba's a lead ball handler. Yeah. And what does Kemba get relegated to a sixth man, Brian? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, you can start Kemba and Harden together, but I mean, there's, like you said, that's the guys that are best with the ball in their hands. So it'd be great for managing it over 48 minutes and when, like, resting one of those guys when you need to. But yeah, would it be the perfect fit? It's stuff. Certainly defensively, it would be quite the challenge in the backcourt if Kemba Walker and James Harden is your starting 1 and 2. So that, but at the same time, they could be good enough offensively in theory, if Kemba's right, where it wouldn't matter. So that, again, that's a situation where, and to be honest, guys, like, I think if the Celtics do end up showing any interest here, I think what you also have to think about in the situation, like, you don't even think about making a deal with this unless like Tatum is fully on board with it. I think that also comes down to that too, because you're not gonna, if you're not gonna bring in a guy that Tatum's not thrilled about in this situation when you just kind of handed him the keys to the franchise with this extension. So that's something that, none of us probably are going to know until something does or doesn't happen.
Well, and you also, and B-Rob said this before, but just to kind of take it to the next level, you have to know, and I don't mean believe, like when the Celtics traded for Kevin Garnett, they believed he would fall in love with the culture and want to stay. And that happened. They believed the same of Kyrie Irving, and it didn't happen. You have to know, which is more than believing, based on what you'd be giving up, 2 of 3 guys who are really part of your core. And I know Smart is not Tatum or Brown. Don't confuse what I'm saying, but the guy is valuable. People like to argue whether or not he's part of your core. He's part of your core. So if you're giving up 2 of the 3 guys who are part of your core, sorry, Kemba, but really it's a 3-man core, really, when you're talking about the here and now and the future. Kemba's not the future. Smart is still young enough to be part of the future. If you're giving up 2 of the 3 pieces who really resemble what you view your core to be, you got to know James Harden is invested in being here and wants to be here for the long term, not just coming in on a rental and seeing how he feels about the place. And I don't think, I just don't see how you could possibly even get that kind of answer from him, other than the fact he just knows he doesn't want to be in Houston anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that would be something where you have to, behind the scenes, figure that out, talk to the right people through intermediaries, and then figure out where he stands on it. And I have no doubt if the Celtics have real interest, like, they'll do that. I mean, with Garnett, it was a totally different situation. Like, they got an extension as they traded for him. So that was, he was signed, sealed, and delivered. That's not going to be possible here based on Harden's current contract. You're not going to be able to tack on more years. So you're going to be going on it like kind of flying blind like they were with Kyrie.
And you're talking about, if you're going to compare KG and James Harden, I mean, you're talking about a guy, Kevin Garnett, who might be the most loyal guy in like an NBA history, or at least in recent memory. Yeah. That guy is loyal to probably several faults.
Anything.
Right. He does.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, you can't compare those guys. That's just like, just from a contractual comparison.
Yeah. It's just different. But you're right though. You have to, when you trade for James Harden, you're mortgaging several things. You might be mortgaging your culture along with it. Right. And in trading Marcus Smart, you're trading a ginormous part of the culture. Like, Smart's the longest tenured Celtic at this point. And it feels a little weird to say that, but also we've grown with him a little bit. But he brings that same, sort of defensive intensity that KG brought when he changed everything, back in 2008. So you're losing a big part of your culture when you trade Marcus Smart. And I think the Celtics really value that. And again, I love James Harden. I'm like one of the few people that enjoys watching him play because I like the chess match that he brings. Some of the stuff that he does drives me absolutely crazy, but I understand he's a very talented player. But at the end of the day, I don't think Boston should do this. And I've waffled on this, and I will admit this, and I've waffled on this. At first, I was all for this because I thought, James Harden coming over is just, from a talent perspective, is a no-brainer. But some of the stuff that you see from a chemistry standpoint, and is he the right fit? Like, things that Boston actually should care about, you have to consider. And when you factor all that stuff in, I just think I think it's a bad fit for James Harden. I think wherever he goes, unless he goes to maybe Brooklyn, which I am praying to the basketball gods, the Kyrie for James Harden trade happens, because it will melt down the internet. The internet will melt down. No, you can't. No, because if Brooklyn can't beat any offer that Philly throws out there unless they put Kyrie on the table. You're not. Ben Simmons is just a much more attractive piece than anything that Brooklyn has to offer, unless it's Kyrie. And even then, I still think I want Ben Simmons more than I want Kyrie Irving, because I think I can build a much better team around Simmons than I can Kyrie Irving. But if it's financially whatever, and if you're Tillman Fertitta trying to get, some sort of financial advantage and maybe save some money, maybe the Kyrie thing's a thing. But I would absolutely die if at the end of the day Kyrie gets traded for James Harden, because the internet and Twitter it'll be the best day in Twitter history. I guarantee it.
Here comes another media blackout by Kyrie Irving.
Love it.